Porter's Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order. Welcome to Hapanmo TV. Now, sorry about the marks on my arm. I've been painting at work today. That's one of the jobs I had to do today. Right, well, this is a video I actually... I'm trying to find time to edit because there's quite a lot in it. I haven't been able to completely for a long time. I've only just really found the time to do it because of various things, dreaming sources, etc. But what happened was I went back to Newcastle. Now you remember I did a show with Nick Colostrum there last November, and since then that group has continued. It's changed its name. It's no longer called the Conspiracy Cafe Wall's End. It's now called Truthseekers Northeast, which I think is a much better name. And they've invited me back for another talk, another series of talks. This time I went back and I did actually 2 separate talks plus a tour. Now, silly bugger that I am, I didn't bring my camera with me. I thought it wouldn't be necessary, basically because these were quite small-scale events. They were private events, which is why I couldn't advertise them beforehand. But so I thought there's no point filming those. But when I got there, I suddenly realised they were actually going to be quite good. I thought they were going to be quite good events. I was expecting them to be very good events, and they were good events. And so luckily, the other people at Truthseekers Northeast used their cameras to film it. So my main talk was filmed. Now, in addition to that, there are clips. There are clips from the other talk I did. Not a complete set, enough for a reportage, unfortunately, enough for a full recording. But there are a number of clips. This is my fault. I should have took my camera with me. Okay, so next time I will take my camera with me. But there are a number of clips from it, and I'll put a link in the description box to my Helen Duncan video, because the incomplete lecture I did, well, the incomplete recording of the lecture, is actually my Helen Duncan talk. It's a slightly shorter version of it, but I'll put the full long version in the description box for you. Now, so I hope you enjoy those. And I've also got a number of sketches as well on top of that, and some of them are quite funny. Right. So I'll leave you for that. I'll let you watch the main talk, and then I'll give you a little bit more information. So I hope you enjoy it.
This thing. How long is it?
Testing.
Right. Okay. Testing 1, 2, 3.
What I'll do is I'll do.
Probably best you didn't.
It's up in the bag.
Good evening and welcome. Truthseekers Northeast present Ben Emlyn-Jones doing a talk on UFOs, one of our favourite subjects. Ben.
Thank you.
Take the seat.
Thank you very much. Right, now, I'm sure you're aware that of all the things I've mentioned before, there's a lot more going on. I mean, there's a lot more going on than just the government cover-ups and the other worlds. When I talk about other worlds, and worlds blending with one another and bleeding over into one another, so there's some cats having a fight here, giving each other dirty looks. They're hissing at each other. Now, one of the things I've come to be aware of. Oh dear, that was not me. It's not me growling. Is that we are not alone. Now, it's statistically possible that we are. No, it is possible physically that we are alone. Now, when I say we're alone, we're the only planet in the universe with any life or any intelligent life and anything like that. Okay, with creatures that we can call our creatures like us, intelligent creatures. Physically, that is possible, but statistically, it is so improbable that it's beyond the coincidence. It's beyond common sense to accept that this is the case. I mean, the actual scale of the universe. Now, I'm not talking about other worlds now. We're talking about now just this world, our own universe. I mean, interesting when you take into account the other worlds I was talking about before. It makes it even more improbable. But even taking into account what we can see, what we can perceive in this three-dimensional linear time, and three-dimensional universe that we perceive and we can comprehend. Even take into account that it's not statistically. So it's statistically beyond possibility that we are, in terms of likelihood that we are alone. Well, we live on a planet called Earth. which seems big when you walk across it. If you get on a plane for Australia, it seems like a long way. Get on a ship, it seems even longer. You walk, it seems even longer. But it's just one of 8 major planets in our solar system. Our solar system is a group of small circular rocks orbiting the Sun. And there's lots of smaller rocks. I mean, if you take into account, there's 8 major planets, but then if you take into account all the smaller planets as well, there are billions of them. All the asteroids, all everything else. All these things orbiting the Sun. The Sun is a G2F class star. It's a star pretty much average, much like any other. There's stars in the sky. The number of stars in the sky are incalculably large. We live in a galaxy called the Milky Way, which contains 100 billion stars, which is a huge number. Many of them are very similar to the Sun. The Sun there's nothing special about the Sun. It doesn't occupy a place of any real importance. It's one star among all the others. Now, if we have a star, if we're all planets orbiting a star, and we have life on, then why shouldn't there be similar life forms on planets orbiting other stars? Now, we didn't know. Now we know. We have actual evidential proof that other stars indeed do have planets, as we've always theorised. That if the Earth can have a solar system, why shouldn't other stars? And it turns out they do. There's actually some things like the James Webb Space Telescope, which can actually see these planets, and it's detected them. It's detected thousands of them. There's the Kepler Space Observatory, another one. It's like a huge telescope that floats in space, and it can see these things. And I think it's improbable. It's actually absolutely improbable that we haven't at some point encountered, or we haven't at some point had other creatures in other planets have not found themselves, have not developed into a similarly intelligent or even superior life form to ourselves in terms of intelligence. Now, the strange thing is, like, we might say, well, okay, that's true, but, well, then, so what? They're so far away, we'll never see them. Why not? We've got into space, we've sent rockets into space, we've sent people into space on missions. There are manned space missions where rockets have been carried out carrying a human crew. There's the International Space Station, we've all seen it. So if we can do that, why can't others? Why can't others develop these techniques for flying in space? And of course, we haven't gone very far into space. We've only gone a short distance. But given time, given the chance to develop our technology, we could build craft that could visit other stars and interact with whatever creatures live on planets orbiting those other stars. It's perfectly possible. In terms of the swiftness of the development of our technology, it happened very quickly. We basically had no means of even flying in the air until the first balloons came along in the middle of the 19th century. And you had airships. Then you had the first heavy-than-air aerofoil airplane by the Wright brothers in 1902. Literally, just half a century, just over, when that happened, the first space rocket, Sputnik 1, flew into space. Now, so why is it when evidence comes to bear that indicates that creatures from these other worlds have got here first, have reached us first, which is possible if they've been developing for longer than we have. If in 50 years we can go from simple aircraft to rockets in space. Why shouldn't something creatures thousands or millions of years in advance of us, build craft that could come to Earth, especially when we are designing craft that could go to visit them? But yeah, when evidence comes to light that suggests this is actually happening, you're called crazy, you're called a loony, you're called a tinfoil hat wearing nutcase, you're called a conspiracy theorist, you're called fringe, you can even lose your job, you can even have your mental health assessed, friends will laugh at you, former friends will disown you. Why is that? But you see, it makes perfect sense that is actually happening, and that is what the phenomenon of unidentified flying objects is. That's what I think it is. We are seeing beings from another world. Now, they may not all be the same thing. There's some evidence, especially from a researcher called John Keel, that suggests that some UFOs have a lot in common with the ghosts and other forms of paranormal phenomena. It's possible we're dealing with creatures that may not necessarily come from other worlds, other planets, but maybe from other dimensions, the other worlds that we're talking about. the other parallel universes. Maybe they found a way to travel between the parallel universes. Maybe they have more in common with these things. But whatever they are, the idea that they are all fakes, they are all marsh gas, they are all weather balloons, they're kites, they're people looking for attention, is nonsense. These things appear to be some form of transport. They contain beings. In some cases, these beings are surprisingly similar to ourselves. Some of the creatures that come out of these UFOs, you could give them a haircut and put normal clothes on, and they walk down the street and you will look twice at them. They're so human. Others appear to be strange kind of reptilian creatures or insect-like creatures, or small little thin grey creatures with huge eyes, huge black featureless eyes, the greys. There's a whole taxonomy of these aliens that live within, that arrive in these craft. And funny enough, people all over the world see the same things. People who haven't necessarily been part of the same culture, people from many different racial, religious and cultural groups, perceive the same creatures. So the greys, the reptilians, the mantids, the Nordics, these various alien types, they're seen by people in Nottingham, in Nigeria and Nevada.
The nearest one to our local area would be the Gated Grey.
Well, that's a very interesting. Yes, you're right here, not far from here, in Gateshead. There was an incident in 1940 where a man, there's a very interesting, Richard T. Hall gathered this, and the man claims that when he was a child, he witnessed the landing of a craft.
Robert Hall, wasn't it?
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he's an interesting chap. Now, his testimony has been examined by several ufologists, including one man who's a former police detective, who is very, very good at listening to what people say and working out whether they're telling the truth or not. And it appears this man is telling the truth. And he remembers it quite well. He was a little boy in 1940, walking on, and these creatures appeared, and there's all kinds of creatures. The creatures he describes are actually very similar to what other people have described in their encounters. Now this situation all came to a head there were several milestones which brought the awareness of the UFO phenomenon to people. A guy called Kenneth Arnold, who was a pilot. He was a pilot of a light aircraft. He was flying near Mount Rainier, Washington State, USA, in June of 1947, and he came across a group of what he described as flying saucers. They looked like saucers, he said, skipping on a pond. And they were flying in the air. Hence the term flying saucers was born. There was an incident just a couple of weeks later where one of these is alleged to have crashed at Roswell, New Mexico, July of 1947. And that's a big subject. Maybe I'll come on to that later because that's a huge subject. But, oh yes. Yeah. This T-shirt says Roswell 70. I actually organised a conference last year in Oxford, which was marked the 70th anniversary of the Roswell incident, which is very interesting. It was the only event outside the town of Roswell itself which marked it. I was quite surprised and a bit disappointed that happened. But my motto is, if I thought someone else would be doing it, I thought, well, there's going to be an event in Britain to mark this, and I found out there wasn't. And my motto is, if no one else is going to do it, I'm going to have to do it myself. So I did. I organised one. Yeah, so I organised a conference to do with the Roswell, mark the 70th anniversary, which was on a Saturday, which coincidentally and luckily happened to be the 8th of July, which is when the fake press release was put out saying it was just a weather balloon. Which is when the fake press release was put out saying it was just a weather balloon. So that's quite timely, I thought. Very timely indeed. So yeah, we have now the idea of alien contact, is very old. It goes back a long way. I mean, it could be people. I think there's every reason to believe it goes back to prehistoric times.
Yeah.
There were like people talked about being spirited away by the fairies, accounts of goblins and beings like that. What they're describing is their own terminology for the very, very same experience. We call them aliens because it's essentially culturally specific to whoever's having the experience. People from many, many centuries ago wouldn't use the word aliens, but they'd say things like goblins and ghosties and beings and fairies and things like that. But it's the same phenomenon. There's no doubt it's the same phenomenon. They describe it very similarly. Now, in 1961, a couple were driving through New Hampshire, USA, called Betty and Barney Hill, and they were driving along, and the their car stopped working and this strange object landed beside the road, and the dog started barking. They had a dog with them called Delcy who started barking. And these now they don't all they remember is for a while that they would just stop there, and then they just missing time. They had missing time, but their lives were never the same again. They felt that something was wrong. In the end, they had hypnotic regression, which is a very, very controversial method. But it indicated, well, they both had this done separately. Betty and Barney both had separate regression systems, sessions with hypnotherapists and psychologists. But a narrative did emerge from this. What happened was that their car stopped, they got out of the car and they were escorted to a craft by a group of creatures which were non-human. They were taken aboard the craft, they were subjected to a medical examination, they were spoken to, they were actually shown a map, which looked like a chart which these aliens used to navigate around the universe. And some of these match known star systems. And so they were shown around the craft, and then they were let go. They were taken back to the car, and that's when their memory came back. It was by that time a couple of hours had passed. Now, it's a pretty typical alien abduction experience, actually, what happened to them. Very typical. It's happened to many, many other people. But this was the first time it was publicised because these people were interviewed in the media. Betty and Barney Hill became very, very famous. They were on television and documentaries were made about them. Books were written about them. One of them was called The Interrupted Journey. That was the first book written about this. There's another one called, which has been released by Kathleen Marden and Stanton Friedman. I think it's called Abducted. I think it's called, but it's just been published. But Kathleen Marden is the niece of Betty Hill.
Yeah, I met her.
Yeah, she was at Holfirth, wasn't she? Yeah, she's a very interesting lady. She did a very good speech. And is the battery all right on that?
No, it's good. It's low.
Let's just stop recording.
It's got 10%.
How's the recording going?
It's going.
Okay. If you want to plug it in at all, it's just as long as it's still running.
Yeah, we'll have to charge it in a minute.
Okay. So there's every reason to think that there's no. I mean, there's been several people who looked into this, and the conventional view is this is all some kind of delusion. The people who have these alien abduction experiences are basically suffering from a psychological problem related to sleep paralysis, hysteria, schizotypal disorders. There's various different names for it. But what I believe is the evidence seems to point that this actually is objectively real, and several psychologists, including Dr. John Mack, who's a famous Harvard psychologist, have actually said this. They've admitted this is real. The evidence suggests that this is a real thing that's happening. Dr. John Mack, when he said this, he was treated really badly. Basically, his university, Harvard University, tried to get him kicked out of his job. He was a tenured professor, which meant that he had like a contract, which means they couldn't get rid of him very easy, but they tried. They took him to court to try and get him kicked out of his job. And he reports that his colleagues wouldn't speak to him. If he walked into the cafeteria, they'd all get up and walk out. He was treated like a criminal for saying this. People wonder how you can't keep secrets. For social animals like us, this sort of thing will persuade most people to keep secrets. Most people don't have the courage to resist that kind of peer pressure.
It's bullying, isn't it?
It is. It's something. This is how secrets are kept. And the psychological manipulators I was talking about in the government conspiracies, the state power, the agenda for the world, they know this and they use it. But so I think a lot of people appear to be having encounters with other beings, and these encounters can vary enormously. The abduction is, by its very nature, abduction is a derogatory term. It's a pejorative way of describing an encounter. Abduction means being taken without your consent, kidnapped, and taken and basically taken aboard a craft against your will. And that does seem to be the case in many. They said the creatures take you. They don't ask your permission. They just take you. And sometimes these abduction experiences can be very unpleasant. They can involve painful medical procedures, sexual abuse, fear, and sometimes very, very emotional pain as well, because sometimes you may be shown an alien creature which they will tell you is your child. and you've been. I mean, this is a really unpleasant, one of the unpleasant parts of the abduction experiences. It's people I know I know people, I have friends who've experienced this. They go to the doctor, and the doctor says, "Congratulations, you're pregnant." A few months later, they wake up and they have some kind of weird. They have this encounter experiences, and they go back to the doctor and they say, "Oh, it appears that we made a mistake, and you're not pregnant." And when they have their hypnotic regression, they found out these aliens took her aboard the craft, and they removed the baby from her, and they put the baby into like an artificial womb of some kind to grow there, or even given the baby to an alien mother to bring up. And this has actually happened to people I know, and it's heartrending. One lady I know she's absolutely devastated by the fact that her son was taken from her. She met him. She's met him a couple of times on the craft when she has these experiences. But she cried whenever she talks about it. It's not an illusion. It's not a dream. It's not a fantasy. It's real. It's and other abduction experiences can be very pleasant. They can be. You can meet aliens that are nice. If you're lucky, you'll meet an alien that's very pleasant. There's even some that appear to be loving and caring, and they want to help us. They want to help us spiritually. Mary Rodwell. How many of you know Mary Rodwell? You're familiar with Mary Rodwell, yeah. She's written a whole book about her, especially children seem to be encountering beings that are very loving and very, very kind, and seem to want to break humanity out of pathological behaviour. And lots of children, then you've heard the phrase indigo child or star child. A lot of them are like this. A lot of them seem to have, from a very young age, appear to almost as if they have surrogate parents among these aliens. And the majority of abduction experiences are fairly neutral. It's almost like we're being dispassionately observed. That's the general impression, the majority. Luckily, the unpleasant ones appear to be a minority. It seems there are aliens that seem to intend us harm, but they're very few. If there were more, then we'd be dead. It's that simple. We'd be dead. So this is real. This is the reality, and that fact, I think, has enormous effect on our status on this world as a species and this planet as what it is. Because the powers that be, the government, the deep state, the Illuminati, for whatever reason, they seem to have a vested interest in us believing that we are
the only planet.
We're the only planet of life. We are this tiny little oasis of life.
I read once that there's more
in an infinite cosmic death.
There's more planets in the solar system than there are grains of sand.
Yeah.
Oh, in the universe, yeah. Well, I mean, there's more. If you consider the scale, I mean, if you think, there's 100 billion stars in our galaxies, I thought. I mean, the number of within the visible universe, there is I don't know how many billions of galaxies, 500 billion galaxies of a similar size.
How can we be the only one?
Yeah.
No, we're not.
Yeah.
There's no way we can possibly be the only ones.
So.
It's physically possible, but statistically, it's like winning the national lottery 10 weeks in a row. It's physically possible to do that. There's nothing against the rules of the game that prevents you doing that. But if someone won 10 weeks in a row, wouldn't you be a bit suspicious they might be weighting the balls?
Yeah.
I would. I certainly would. Okay, so we're going to take a little break now because I'm going to charge the camera and charge your glasses. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, hi everybody, Truthseekers Northeast here. With great pleasure, we'd like to introduce once again Ben Emlyn-Jones, who's going to talk to us about Ufo Disclosure. So,
thanks guys, thank you very much. Yes, that's right, I'm going to talk about the UFO disclosure issue. Now, the UFOs, which I've talked about, these unidentified flying objects, sometimes they crash. They come down like a human machine. They're not perfect, and they do malfunction. and they come down. They come to grief on the Earth's surface. And now, when this happens, you would think, well, the government would go, well, that's fine. We'll just, that's essentially proof that they exist. It's like when a plane crashes. It's all in the news, isn't it? We know about it. And the thing about it is, though, that that is not what happens when UFOs crash. Wherever they crash in the world, something very similar happens, regardless of what country that crash takes place. It's as if the various nation states are instituting the same policy. There's a global policy in place which they all obey. They all obey without question. And that is that the area is immediately sealed off by the government. Barricades put up. The police and the military move in and they seal off the area. They prevent anyone approaching it. They then salvage the wreckage. They remove all the decisive physical evidence, and then they pretend that what happened was not a UFO crash retrieval at all. It was something. It was a weather balloon. It was a swamp gas. It was mistaken identity. It was a hoax. It was anything other than that. And everything goes back to normal. The area, the cordon is released, and everything goes back to normal. And then the question is, why is that the case? There could be many reasons. I mean, it seems to be quintessential for the deep state's control over the population or their relationship with us, that we believe that we are alone. We believe that we literally are this tiny little pale blue dot, as Carl Sagan calls it, this tiny little oasis of life in an infinite cosmic desert. It seems to be fundamental to the elite's relationship with us that is the case. That we perceive it that way. We're allowed to privately believe otherwise if we want, but it's a very, very different thing to actually think that privately and to have it confirmed by that big Freudian father figure in Westminster and the White House. That's a different matter. To have it officially acknowledged would change the world, and I think they're worried about the effect that would have on us as a species. And they're not worried. Put it another way, they're worried about their ability to control us. They don't care about it. It's not for our welfare at all. Quite the opposite, because this secret is an enormous detriment to our welfare, as I will explain. Now, this is not exclusively to do with extraterrestrials, because this is to do with technology. Now, these craft that come from wherever they come from, whether it's another planet from millions of light years away, or it's another parallel universe, they are not doing it on Texaco Unleaded 4-star. They have a power plant and propulsion system that is very, very different from any that we have, which is publicly available, at least in our world. So we have now it appears they seem to have an ability to create energy out of nothing. That's what they do. They also have the ability to control gravity.
I'm Ben Emlyn-Jones.
Hello. Are you all sitting comfortably? Already? Are your glasses charged?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, another thing I'm really interested in, I'll come to more details of the deep state later on when I talk about the chemtrails and other things, but one of the things that interests me enormously is, I think, another very, very important issue, or I think one of the most important issues affecting this world, is that our very view of the world is skewed by the limitations of our senses and our understanding. And this is not the fault of the Illuminati or the deep state. This is something which is due to our human limitations. It's due to what most of us, our brains are able to contend with. Although there are many exceptions, and some of you might, I know that some of you in this room are. I mean, I'm referring to those who might have psychic abilities. But the world we see around us is not the only world that exists. It's not the only reality. This world of material, of length, breadth, height and width, the physical world, it's not the only one that exists. Even serious scientists are starting to say that. There are other worlds out there. There are other worlds beyond length, breadth, height and width, worlds which you could never reach if you travel through space forever. because if you travel through space, you're simply travelling through a larger, more distant part of our world, the universe, which, as huge as it is still limited in terms of the three dimensions. If you could travel to the most distant galaxy visible in a telescope, it'd still be a three-dimensional journey, every bit as much as walking down to the local shops is. But there's more to the world than that. There are other worlds which some people have the ability to perceive. Those of you might encounter at the Spiritualist Church. These other worlds are often quite similar to ours. Sometimes, if you happen to be present in one of these worlds, you wouldn't necessarily immediately know you were not in our world, even though you were completely separated from our own world. Yet there are other worlds which are very, very different indeed. Now, there are many, many differences between people's experience of these other worlds and of this world. One of the most interesting differences is that if you travel to one of these other worlds, you often encounter people who, in our world, have died. In other words, their bodies stopped working. They've ceased to be in our world. We bury them or we cremate them, and they're gone. From as far as we're concerned, they're gone. You can have no more further interaction with them. According to a conventional worldview, what you might call the skeptic worldview, they actually do not exist at all. However, in these other worlds, when people have encounters with these other worlds, these people apparently do exist. They do continue to exist in these other worlds. Now, it's possible through changes in consciousness to actually perceive other worlds. And this is what a medium does. If you've had an experience which involves a perception of someone who's died, or of a different world beyond our own, you're essentially having a mediumistic experience. And I was talking to somebody earlier on about entering parallel universes. And this is somebody who actually told me that they had an experience in London where they entered a parallel universe, and luckily came back to this one. However, I mean, I think this thing is getting more. This kind of experience is getting more and more common for several different reasons. One of those is the Mandela Effect. I think is a symptom that maybe more and more of us are having the experiences of our world, our universe, maybe merging or brushing up against or bleeding over into other universes. And it's possible that we are actually moving from different universes in many ways which you don't often notice, and these universes are almost identical to our own, and then there's some differences. Now, we mentioned people who've died, right? Well, when Nelson Mandela died, he's a South African political activist, former president of the country. He died in 2013, and there was a huge funeral, which was broadcast all over the world, internationally. Now, when that happened, a number of people came forward and said, I remember Nelson Mandela dying in 1986 in prison. And when I say I remember it so distinctly. I remember seeing news stories about it, reading it in newspapers, watching on television about how he'd been found dead lying in his cell. And it was as real and as vivid a memory as any other that I have.
Can we pause?
Yeah, sure. All right. We're rolling.
Rolling.
Right, Pamo TV, action. Now, what I mean by New World Order is something a lot of people have denied as possible, or even desirable. The state wouldn't want this amount of power, and that it wouldn't be possible for a state to actually accrue that much power, because we wouldn't stand for it, would we? You're not going to want to live in a world where you are every aspect of your life is as controlled as a battery chicken. You want to be free. We want as much freedom as possible. We want to be free to do what we want. If something doesn't hurt anyone else, we should be allowed to do whatever we want. I mean, that's the idea of liberty. You know, this is what's written into many constitutions, such as the US Bill of Rights, and indeed the Magna Carta, which is the British Constitution, and many other constitutions around the world of various nation states. But that, I think, is to perhaps misjudge the psychology of those who are in control of the state. And we were talking earlier on about psychopaths and about what they are, and that once you get to the highest level of the state, the number of psychopaths, as per the normal element of the population, that is people who have no conscience, they in a sense have no feelings. They're people who have absolutely no feelings at all, so they don't feel any guilt about doing anything bad. They don't feel any empathy for other people that they hurt. They don't feel any fear of the future. They don't feel any regrets about things that have gone wrong in the past. They live in the eternal present, and they live in a world where their own well-being and their own desires are all that matter. Their own will is the only force. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, as Aleister Crowley said. And I think that's been misunderstood as a psychopathic statement. And it is, from what we know about Crowley, it's not quite as black and white as that for him. But for the psychopath, it is. Andrei Lubachevsky wrote a very, very good book called Political Ponerology. And he says that 6% on average of the population were these, what Amitabh Stanford, another researcher, called organic portals. In other words, they're humans, but they have no human soul. And I know that's politically incorrect to say that, because we like to think of humans as being human and to give everyone having human rights. If we imagine people have a human soul, we might start to think, well, maybe they shouldn't have human rights. And I agree, there are serious implications here regarding this issue, because you can't do a psychopath test, even though there was a book by John Ronson called The Psychopath Test, which has a lot to be desired. I much prefer Lubachevsky's book, and indeed several others by, there's an excellent book, there's several books written by someone called Sandra L. Brown, I also recommend. So what you'll find is when you get to the highest levels of the superstate, the deep state, you'll find that the proportion of psychopaths, as close you get to that level, the proportion of psychopaths versus empaths changes from the average of 6% to much higher on the psychopathic spectrum. And eventually, when you get to the highest levels, the whole upper levels of this agenda are populated, staffed, crewed by non-humans, essentially. David Icke has said that he has spoken to many people who've seen individuals in human bodies shapeshift, change into a reptilian form. Now, this sounds bizarre, off the wall, something from science fiction, but there's a considerable amount of evidence to suggest this is the truth. But as Brian Gerrish says of UK Column, he says, you know, it doesn't matter what they are or who they are, it's what they do. That's what matters. And so it doesn't matter what they are. Their effects are the point. And they want to create a one-world government, a one-world authoritarian government. This would be similar to what George Orwell envisaged in his book 1984. A remarkable book about a man called Winston, who's living in a future world in which the state has total control over everything, and that each individual is not regarded as human. They're regarded as simply components of the body politic. And as one famous line in that book says, if you die, Winston, what will happen? There's no problem with that, because you are just a cell in the body. When you cut your fingernails, you don't lament over the clippings, do you? Mm. And so where individual human life means nothing, because we're all just components of the body politic. In such a situation, there will be no relationship at all apart from the relationship between the individual and the state. So, which means that we wouldn't have friends, we wouldn't fall in love and have partners, we wouldn't have children, we wouldn't have parents, we wouldn't have communities, we wouldn't be part of any country, we wouldn't be part of any culture. I don't even believe we would even be normal biological humans as we know them today. We wouldn't be white, black, Chinese, different races. We would essentially be a clone of a single group, which would be genetically engineered. Okay, sleep tight. There is good news. I don't want to stand here and just issue portents of doom and gloom and depression and futility, because that would be incorrect. Because I'm not a futile person. I'm not a pessimistic person. I'm an optimistic person. I'm kind of. I feel hopeful. I wouldn't be doing this otherwise. I'd go out and kill myself if I thought that was what. If I thought there was no hope, I really would. So I will give you some good news. And now I'm going to talk to you about another issue, and I think the key to.
Shall we have another snack break before?
Yeah, sure.
Because I'm desperate to get the food ready.
No problem.
Start.
Right, hello everyone.
Hello.
Thanks all for coming. I think we've missed it. There's a couple of people still waiting for, but they might have to come in to the client late. And that's not a problem. I'll see if they can hopefully be able to catch up. I've come here, and probably you come here, I'm guessing, is because we're all united by a common idea. We may disagree on some of the details, but the fundamental issue affecting the world today, and I think it's the most important issue affecting the world today and humanity, is the world is not what we conventionally think it is, what we conventionally told that it is, in many, many different ways. There are many issues that mainstream society does not recognise as real, yet I think are not only real, I think they are by far the most real thing in existence in the universe. These subjects can be categorised into certain segments. They can be taken and categorised into a list of various headings. And the headings is how I introduce everything I do. Because my name's Ben Emlyn-Jones, and I run a website called Hospital Porters Against the New World Order. And this includes a radio show, I have a YouTube channel, and I write a regular blog, and I've written several books. And when I introduce my radio show, I say tune in for all the latest news, views and reviews from the world of government cover-ups, ghosts, UFOs, paranormal investigation, hidden history, hidden mysteries, forbidden history and archaeology, cryptozoology, chemtrails. Those categories. And that is basically how I summarise my worldview. It's something I've dedicated my life to. There's very little else I actually do, to be honest. I don't have a favourite football team. I don't go on cruises around the world. I don't play a sport as such. I enjoy these things sometimes, but nearly all my time when I'm not at work is spent dealing with these subjects that I'm going to talk about. Now, when it comes to government cover-ups, that's not really that contentious as a definition, because governments lie. Everyone knows governments lie. They lie continuously. Politicians lie. We know that, and that's not really a secret. However, I think it's the scale and severity of the lies that mainstream society does not recognise. It's the difference between what most people think are the lies of the mainstream and what actually are the lies of the mainstream. So, for example, if you ask the average person what do politicians lie about, and they'll say, oh, well, they'll lie about tax cuts to get votes in an election. They'll lie about how they use their expenses. They'll lie about their extramarital affairs, things like that. They'll lie about, and the most severe in the mainstream is, they'll lie about their reasons for their country getting involved in wars. But it goes far deeper than that. And the really serious lies of politicians are far more devastating and far more deceitful and far more sinister, and it paints them in a much more disreputable light by far. Because what they are really lying about, and I don't mean every single politician, some of them are almost subconsciously collaborating with this agenda, and they're subconsciously collaborating with the real deceitful people. The real instigators of what are conventionally known as conspiracy theories are not our elected representatives. They are people who, in a sense, what you might term a super government, a covert super government. People use words like Illuminati. In recent times, the term deep state has emerged, and This is by people who don't necessarily ever consider to use the word Illuminati. However, they appear to have come to the same conclusion as the people who do use the word Illuminati. And they've simply given it another name for the same thing. Oh, so feel free to comment, anyone, if you want to say anything, anybody. Feel free. Okay, I don't want to speak a complete monologue. What I've come to realise, what I've come to understand is there's a general trend in the political world which covers the entire globe, and this trend is toward greater authoritarianism and internationalism. And this has been going on in one form or another for as long as I can look back in history. This desire to centralise power, to increase state control of a population and of a nation, and on the international scene. This is sometimes known as the New World Order. The ultimate goal, I mean, if you follow where this evidence leads, where these trends lie, they converge. They converge at a position of total state power, total state control of everything, of the world. And that is what is commonly known as the New World Order. It's sometimes known as the New World Order. There's no proof that the New World Order agenda exists. There's no well, there are documents actually who talk about a world government, which many politicians, even some quite famous politicians and great statesmen have written. But the idea that there should be a one world government which has complete authoritarian control of everything is not really sort of known about. Are you alright?
Good.
Okay. Now, that was at the house of one of the members of Truthseekers Northeast. As I said, it was a small-scale private event, but I mean, the room was packed. There must have been like about 10 people there. I mean, we had to move chairs around and things like that to get everyone in. And it was really, really good. And I'm pleased to say I'm going to go back there in a few more weeks and do another series of talks for these people. And there's also going to be a few more activities. And yes, I will remember to bring my camera this time. So I'll let you know more about that at the end. I can't say too much in advance because, once again, it's a private event. Okay, so I can't sort of like advertise it. So unfortunately, you know, it's invitation only. But I will be doing a recording, which will be nice. Now, there's what you're going to see now is a series of little clips that I did of my other talk, which I did at a community centre. I did it at a really nice community centre, where I spoke to a number of people from the Spiritist Church. And the talk I did was a slightly shorter version of my Helen Duncan talk. And unfortunately the whole of it is not recorded, but there are some clips. And there's a link in the description box to the full version of my Helen Duncan talk, my most recent and fullest version of my Helen Duncan talk. Okay. Now, and on top of that, after that, there's a few more sketches. Now, again, there's not enough here for a full reportage, but I want to include these sketches because they're so good. Now, some of them are informative. I mean, some of them are just me talking, doing a talk, and others are just funny. We decided to let our hair down and be a bit comedic. So yeah, we basically went to Segedunum. Now, Segedunum is an old Roman fort at the eastern extremity of Hadrian's Wall. Now, I always thought if I ever got to see Hadrian's Wall, I'd have a big Boudica moment, but I didn't. Maybe because there was a lot of other people there, and it was like a kind of museum-like atmosphere. We went in there, we were the only people in the museum, and no one else was around. This was like a Sunday afternoon, and for some reason no one else was there. So we basically, I didn't have my camera, but the others got their cameras out, and we did a little bit, we did a kind of impromptu film shoot. And it was really good. I mean, as I said, I might redo it. If the others are up to it, if the other people there are up for it, I might redo it in a more sort of formalised and top quality way, or make it slightly different. Because this was all kind of improvised. There was no script or anything. We just did it off the top of our heads. But we thought we needed to let our hair down. That's probably another reason why I didn't have a Boudica moment, because I was just having such a good laugh. So I hope you like those as well. I hope you like those sketches too. It was really good. Now, Richard Wright was there, which is really cool. I've not seen him for ages. You know Richard Wright because he's been in my Exopolitics videos. He was there. It was really, really cool. And he came along. We had some talks. We had some fun, and we had a good laugh. And well, you may see me playing around with these chakra bells, which are this big steel drum which you put on you and you beat, and they're supposed to alter your chakras, your energy centers and things like that, or your meridian lines. It's an old Chinese thing, I think, or Indian. And well, we had a bit of fun with that. And also, I channeled the spirit of Bob Monkhouse. Wait and see. Also, Maureen did her own little sketch of Kunk on Britain as well. So if you enjoy Philomena Kunk, you'll like that. It was one of the most wonderful few days I've ever had. It was just a joy from beginning to end. And the Truthseekers Northeast people are, I think I've made friends for life there. They are wonderful people, all of them, and I love them to bits. They are beautiful people, wonderful souls, and I can't wait to go back there. I'm going to go back there in a few weeks, and I'm really looking forward to it so much. And I will have a full camera reportage for you when I come back, I promise. And so we had such a good time. I want to say thanks to all those guys for such great fun. We had a brilliant time. Maureen, Joe, Dave, Richard Wright, of course, and all the others, and all the people who came along to the talks. Thank you very, very much indeed. So with enough said, please enjoy the rest of this video, and there'll be another video coming soon. So it remains for me to say before the end: hospital porters, pride and dignity, stop the New World Order.
Ready?
Go.
Can you feel your chakras getting cleansed?
I think so, yeah. Oh,
How was that?
It's nice.
Clean your chakras for tonight.
I'll be alright now, yeah. My chakras are clean.
Cleaned. Are we rich? Your turn. Get down.
Go on, mate.
Get
Go
down.
on. You won't have
No. Come on, Rich.
Get your chakras clean.
Get your chakras cleaned.
Get the chakras out.
Pull your t-shirt down, laddie. That's it. Right, breathe in. Where's your flat tummy, Paul? Right, ready? How was that?
Oh, it's quite. I don't want to tell you.
I'm trying to get the you've rolled.
Yeah, ready now.
Okay, rolling. I'm trying to reproduce the la 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 from Close Encounters. But it's not got the right notes. But we could have like we could have something equivalent to the table tipping thing, couldn't we? So
I don't know. We could summon Jimmy Savile with them.
Oh my God! now then. So A B. Oh, it's a B. A B C D E F G H I J K L M N O B O. Is that Bob?
Is it Bob Monkhouse?
Yes, Bob Monkhouse. So Bob, will you tell me, why did you make such a crappy programme as Bob's Full House? A B C D E F G H I J K L M N O P Q R S T. A B C D E F G H T H. Is it they paid you?
Because they paid you load. And then, but Bob Monkhouse was very good at one-liners, wasn't he? So it seems a shame that he ended up with flatliner.
I bet that pisses you off, doesn't it, Bob?
Yeah, Bob, I bet you didn't know you were selling so much bloody funeral and life insurance now as well, eh?
Finish. Cut.
Don't worry about the top cats selling Halifax Bank. So everyone sells out in the end, don't they?
No, that's it. Yeah. Shame on you, Bob. I hope you burn in hell. But yeah, I'm going to go see a show tomorrow as well. Yeah, this talk. I'm sorry we don't have a projector. Otherwise we could have like a big up on the wall or get a screen or something. We don't have that. I don't know how many. Obviously, some of you won't see this properly, except maybe on the front row. But there's these slides. Maureen has the slides. and she's happy to share them with you. I'm happy for you to distribute them. And also there are versions of this online on my website. There's recordings of this particular lecture online, so you can watch it there. And this is my website. HPANWO stands for Hospital Porters Against the New World Order. It's getting around quite a bit now. And there's all kinds of things on there, including, like I said, there's a YouTube lecture of this particular talk, YouTube version of recording. Several actually. And that is, I don't know how you can see that, but that's me, the portering Buddha. I was a hospital porter for 23 years, like Maureen was too. Maureen was too.
Yes, in a former life, yeah.
And, well, I lost my job in rather strange circumstances. I think it was a conspiracy, personally. That's a long story. This evening. And this is one of the reasons why it resonates with me and why I've taken an interest in this particular topic. Now, what I'm going to talk to you about tonight is a very, very interesting story. It involves the paranormal, it involves government cover-ups, and so it's just perfect for my particular interest. The central figure of this story is this lady. This is Helen Duncan. She was born in 1897 in Perthshire, Scotland. And from a very young age, it was quite clear she wasn't quite like most other children. She used to frighten her classmates enormously at school by going into a trance and yelling strange things in the middle of the classroom, things like that. From a very young age, she felt that she had spirit guides with her that were unseen entities that were talking to her. She could feel their presence. Sometimes they helped her out, like she would, if she didn't know the answer to a particular question in class, she'd put her school book underneath the chair and she'd pull it out, and the right answer, someone had written in the right answer. Her nickname, it's amazing, useful, isn't it? Maybe someone would do that with the lottery numbers, that's what I would like. Definitely. Now, so her nickname in school was Hellish Nell, and this was not because of her paranormal abilities, this was to do with her personality. She was fiery, very fiery, she could be bad-tempered, she was a powerful personality, sometimes quite intimidating, fairly typical Scottish woman, perhaps you could say. But she was exceptionally so, she was even more Scottish than the average Scottish woman. But her powers and her abilities were very, very useful, and there was a time when she was a teenager when a man went missing he was out walking one day and he didn't come home, and it was very cold weather, there was deep snow everywhere. And people didn't know what to do because he was lost and he would die out there when it was so cold. And Helen Duncan actually went with a search party to find him, and she used techniques which would today be called remote viewing. And I'll be saying more about remote viewing later in this talk. And they managed to find this man before it was too late and he survived. Now, most spiritualism was done in private houses. So there'd be someone with a house and they would convert one of their rooms into a spiritualist centre. And basically it would be very much like the room we're in now. There'd be a stage at the front and there'd be a row of seats where the spectators could sit like you are now. And there would be a cabinet. Now the cabinet is basically simply a part of the stage which is covered by a curtain. Usually it's a black curtain which was pulled round, and there'd be a chair inside where the medium in trance would sit. Now what Helen would do, Helen went to extraordinary lengths to prove herself genuine. I mean, she did, one part of the reason for this was she got into psychical research, which I'll tell you about in a minute. But even before she did this psychical research, she was using techniques several techniques, because she wanted people to believe her. She wanted to prove herself true to the people watching. And so she did several things that other mediums do not. She went into another room, she took off all her clothes, and she put on a big black gown, and nothing else. She just put that over her body, and she'd be tied into it. There'd be no fastenings, it'd be like strings. She'd tie up, all the hems would be tied with strings. And what's more, before she put on this gown, she had a nurse with her, someone called Molly Goldney, who was an employee of hers, a nurse. And this nurse would search her body, basically poke and prod her in every corner she had to make sure she wasn't hiding any objects on her person. So you know what I'm talking about. And what's more, you might think, well, this isn't fair, because this is an employee of Helen's. You can't trust her to be impartial and to do this search properly. So Helen would invite certain members of the audience, several of the women who were in the audience, to come and watch while this was done, which is an extraordinary thing when you think about it. It was quite such an indignity to actually allow yourself to be posed and prodded in this manner publicly in front of several strangers, a group of strangers. But the reason she did this was she wanted people to believe her. She wanted to build a reputation as an honest medium. Because she knew there were fakes, and there are fakes. She didn't want to be labelled along with those. And when she got into the realm of psychical research, she tightened up her procedures even more. So she was a very honest person. Very honest. Now what would happen is she would come from this room in her black dress, she'd walk into the room, she'd sit in the cabinet at the front of the room, the curtains would be drawn, and the lights would be turned down and the seance would begin. Very often there'd be a small red light burning, like less than 40 watts, just a small bulb, or sometimes a candle. And that would be the only lighting in the room. Now, the reasons for this will depend on your point of view of what spiritualism is and whether you consider it genuine or not. The skeptics will say that the darkness was necessary so that she could perform her magic tricks, her illusion. So if it was too much light in the room, the audience would see the strings and they'd see the people working behind the scenes clad in black with the old fishing rods with the spirit trumpets flying around the place, things like that. However, if you take spiritualism seriously, the explanation is that bright lights actually would harm the medium and prevent the spirits appearing in ectoplasm. The darkness was actually necessary for the effect. Helen, she's a big lady. She's no ballerina. How's she going to squeeze into that? Where's she going to hide it? I mean, as I said, this was a nurse who was searching her and who knew what to do. Right? Knew exactly how to ensure she wasn't hiding anything on her body. So this is a fake case against Helen Duncan in my view.
It's nothing like ectoplasm.
Exactly. I mean, when this all, I'll talk about the witchcraft trial now, but I mean, this all came out in the main trial, which happened later.
So, what was the relationship between Harry Price and Desmond Moore?
It turns out that they were corresponding, and they basically had a conspiracy to destroy Helen Duncan, because Harry Price never forgave her for what she had done. Well, it wasn't her fault really, but what happened in London in 1930. So they wanted to bring her down. Helen's granddaughter has all the details of that particular case. Now, Helen carried on with what she was doing, and she carried on practicing, and then World War II broke out. And this was a time when her services were much, much more required, because we lost a lot of people. I mean, it wasn't quite like the Great War, but there was still, at the end, 300,000 soldiers had died, British soldiers. And there were 60,000 people killed at home in the Blitz. And while it was a long time ago, and we see it as a historical event, something which is almost like a piece of fiction for us, because we know how it goes. But to be in the middle of it and not know how the story was going to end is a different matter. And I think this is why trouble broke out for Helen during the war. So she was travelling the country all over the place. A lot of people were booking her. They wanted to talk to people they'd lost. They'd lost relatives. They had relatives fighting overseas. They had people killed at home. Everyone was on rations. There were several people who didn't get enough food. There was people who didn't get medical attention because there was no medical supplies, things like that. It was frightening. It was a frightening period. He was a member of the Society for Psychical Research, and he was also a good friend of several other people involved. He knew Aleister Crowley, for example, a famous occultist. And so he was pretty stunned by this. And so he immediately went back to his office and he phoned the Admiralty and said, strange question, have you just lost a battleship? Has a British battleship just been sunk by any chance? They said, no sir, everything's absolutely fine. Oh, that's all right, it must be obviously they've got wires crossed or something like that. Anyway, he got a phone call a few hours later on the secure line. So, Brigadier Firebrace, a correction to your earlier messages. We actually had a ship that's just sunk. HMS Hood. This is an Admiral class battle cruiser. It's one of the most powerful ships the Royal Navy possessed, and it's just been attacked by the battleship, the German battleship Bismarck. in the North Sea, just off the Orkney Islands, and been sunk. 1,400 men. You guessed that, didn't you? 1,400 men drowned during that disaster. Firebrace was stunned because this had literally just been. It wasn't even in the newspapers yet. He just a couple of hours ago he'd been hearing Helen Duncan give the same news that he just heard through the official government sources. So Helen Duncan knew even before these people did. Because remember the first phone call he did to the Admiralty, they hadn't heard of it. Helen Duncan knew even before the Admiralty knew. Now, Firebrace, as an intelligence officer and also a spiritualist and someone with an open mind to psychic phenomena, would have understood immediately the implications of what was going on here. Helen Duncan was giving information to people. She was giving information to the public on the war outside the normal channels. And wartime, that's a great concern because he realised that it's quite possible she might divulge classified information as well through the same sources, through the testimony of the dead. Who said dead men don't tell tales? You know, you ever read these spy novels or you watch a spy movie? This actually says from this date, I can't remember what date, was July whereby anyone attempting the manifestation of spirits and spectres through cunning and crafty science, and it basically was saying, it was saying if you pretend to be a psychic when you're not, they can actually prosecute you. So it's the Witchcraft Act. Now, if she's found guilty, she faced 9 months in jail. So this was not only a very archaic law that had been dusted off and brought out, and she was taken to this most prestigious court, along with she was there with lords and serial killers and traitors lined up for her trial. It's a bit, talk about a sledgehammer to crack a nut. And she risked being locked up for a very long time. Oh, hang on. This is a newspaper photograph of Helen with her husband walking to the Old Bailey for the start of the trial. And you can all see maybe more front row can see the frown on her face, the confusion she must be feeling. This was an escalation beyond anything she could comprehend. I mean, and a lot of other people were confused as well. Why was this happening? No one would say, no one would tell them, no one would tell them. It was like it was very, very Kafkaesque. She was in trouble, they wouldn't say exactly what was going on, but she had this terrible charge put against her, and she was now being dragged into court, possibly to face major jail time. Essentially, the first part of the trial was essentially a battle of witness testimonies. The prosecution versus defence. Now these people were all the congregation. There were, if you can call them the congregation, the sitters, if you prefer that word. There was up to 40 of them in the room that evening, and it's amazing how many people you could actually pack into that small room, as you saw. I wouldn't think there's room for that many people, but there were. And they did manage to get those people in there. Now, the prosecution witnesses, this is rather weird because another name comes up here. Well, it's an old name, a bad old name. It comes up like a bad smell. Harry Price. 14 years after he first began his campaign to destroy Helen, he comes back into our life to coach the prosecution witnesses for this particular trial. Now, I don't know if that's, I did talk to a lawyer about that, and he did say that is normal practice. I mean, it's unusual, but it's not against the rules. However, it's very odd that would be necessary. You'd have to get a psychical researcher who previously denounced Helen as a fraud to coach some people who essentially saw something that he didn't. Why would you need that? This is starting to look like an attempt to pervert the course of justice. Now, the lead prosecution witness was the man who blew the whistle in the Master Temple that night. There's a man called Lieutenant Stanley Worth. He was accompanied by someone called PC Rupert Cross. Now, these two men were both police officers. As I said, Cross was a PC, Worth was a special constable, and they were both friendly with Chief Constable Arthur West, who, if you recall, was the man who was already under suspicion of perjury and an attempt to pervert the course of justice in court number 1, although no charges were ever laid against him. And also his connection to John Cyril Maude, and also the fact that he gave Helen Duncan that character assessment, that character witness assessment, which meant the judge could send her down for the full 9 months. Now, Worth, as I said, to remind you, was a member of the Royal Navy's Provost Special Investigation Division, which means he's the kind of person who would be reporting to Maude and to Fleming in the course of his duties as an intelligence officer. He lied under oath as well, because when Loseby, the defence barrister, cross-examined him on this and asked him if he was a member of the intelligence services, he said no. This was a lie, it was a proven lie, yet he was never charged with perjury. Very, very odd indeed. Now, what Worth and Cross said was very, very simple. Now, Worth said that he regularly attended seances with him and his friends, and he did it as a form of entertainment. As I said, some people did this sort of thing. And for him, he called it going to the spooks, and it was kind of a lad's night out for him. Perhaps the equivalent, you know, an alternative to going to the pub or going to the cinema or something like that. And he'd go to the spooks. Although I imagine the cinema and pub would be an awful lot cheaper, considering it was 12 shillings to get in the door. It's a lot. I don't know what that is in our money, but it's not cheap. Now, he went along there and expecting to see something really amazing, and this is what a lot of the other prosecution witnesses echoed this same sentiment. And what they saw and said was Helen Duncan prancing up and down with a big sheet over her, a big white sheet covering her body. And he was very angry. He saw it his duty to bring her to justice. And he told Loseby, I wasn't involved in the intelligence services. I was spying on my own account, whatever the hell that means. Amazing thing. Anyway, Dodson refused. The judge said, no, I'm not going to have this happen. And Loseby protested. He appealed. And again, what happened was the judge then agreed to poll the jury to see if they wanted to see it. And the jury elected not to. What? WTF? If you were on that jury, would you have voted no? Who honestly would have voted no? I don't want to see that. I mean, this is not just something that, it's a spectacle which you normally have to pay a lot of money to see if you go and watch it commercially, which you get to see for nothing. But you get to be a witness of history being made, a psychic manifestation seance in a courtroom, in an English courtroom. I mean, my goodness me. Yes, this is where Loseby underestimated the situation. I don't think he didn't realise this was going to happen. And so the jury have elected not to see this, so the court proceeded. The trial proceeded without Helen Duncan being able to perform. And at the end of the trial, guilty, unanimous verdict. And with Chief Constable Arthur West and his damning character assessment, the judge had no choice. He sent her to Holloway Prison for 9 months. As I said, she got some time off because she'd been held on remand. But she was released. She wasn't released until the middle of September. Now, while Helen Duncan was languishing in her prison cell, something happened on the 6th of June that year. There was something called Operation Overlord, a mass amphibious landing of Allied forces in Normandy, France, which history would come to know as D-Day. This is a copy of the minutes of the trial, of the proceedings of the trial, which you could buy. It's all there in the book form, so you can actually read through what happened, the trial of Mrs. Duncan. And I recommend very much this book. This is the Helen Duncan Mystery Show Trial by Robert Hartley, book written in 2007, which is basically it's a kind of like cold case review by a man who's very interested in spiritualism and is open to the idea. He's the man who discovered the involvement of Ian Fleming, which we would expect, because Fleming was involved in the disinformation campaign relating to D-Day. And this is an important point. And this is, I do recommend, get a copy of that book if you can. Very, very good book. Now, this goes back a long way. What happened with Helen Duncan is, in a sense, nothing new. This connection between the paranormal and warfare, it has a long history. This here is Julius Caesar, Now, he used to consult a soothsayer every time he went into battle. And maybe he credited this to his enormous successes. Alexander the Great, another great general, used to believe, he took the supernatural seriously related to his campaigns, and he had a personal soothsayer who accompanied him on his campaign, where he conquered, for a short time, he actually conquered most of the known world. This one man. And there's also a strange case in I think in the year 1412, where a young girl, 14-year-old girl from the town of Arques in France, was put in command of the French army. Her name was Jeanne May, and she was put in charge of the French army. The king put her in command because he believed she had divine inspiration. And under her leadership, the French army managed to beat the English at the siege of Orleans. Unfortunately, the English captured Jeanne and they burned her at the stake. Her name, Joan of Arc, endures to this day, figure of history. During the Cold War, there was a huge number of projects relating to what's known as remote viewing, the technique Helen used to track down the man who was missing in the snowstorm when she was a young girl. Both sides in the Cold War took remote viewing seriously, even though in public they both denounced it as just a superstition and nonsense. He coined the phrase artificial intelligence, and he designed the first artificial intelligence machines. This was long before it was possible to build them. And so he was very much a prophet of the modern age. He built computers. He built computers. You can go visit it at the museum at Bletchley Park. And he built computers which were intended to decrypt the Enigma, which is the code the Germans were using in the Battle of the Atlantic. And they said it was unbreakable. They said this code is unbreakable. Yes, it's called Enigma. Very good movie. Yeah, it's got Kate Winslet, I think, and there's another Benedict Cumberbatch. I think another film. Yeah, there's another one which is called Turing with Benedict Cumberbatch. So he was like This is one of the greatest war heroes of all. He decrypted the Enigma. It gave the Allies the edge on the Battle of the Atlantic. I mean, the U-boat commanders, even they didn't realise. They were trying to persuade the German High Command, look, someone's cracked the Enigma code. And the command said, no, it's unbreakable, it's impossible. And it's just somehow they've done it, we know, because these planes appear out of nowhere whenever our submarines surface. And it's like, well, how do they know where we are? And so, yeah, the country owes this man a great debt. In terms of the story of the World War II, this is one of the most important figures from the Allied side of the world, and he should have been one of the greatest war heroes of all, but it was not to be. You see, Alan Turing, the story of Alan Turing is tragic, it's shameful, because he was arrested himself. He was convicted of doing something which is completely acceptable today. He was an out-of-the-closet homosexual. And he was tried under the Le Boucherie Amendment, part of what's known as the sodomy laws. And he was convicted. Now, he was offered a deal. They said that he could be freed from jail if he underwent medical treatment, supposedly to turn him straight. And this medical treatment, though, ruined his physical and mental health. In 1954, he committed suicide. Now, there's been a long campaign to pardon Alan Turing, and this has been running ever since 1967 when the Le Boucherie Amendment was repealed. Now, in 2008, they got Gordon Brown, the Prime Minister, to apologise, issue a formal government apology to Alan Turing. But they said an actual pardon would be too difficult because it would open up a common law precedent for lots and lots of other people who, and it would be too complicated because technically he was convicted of a law that was on the statute books at the time, the law was repealed, so an apology is enough. The campaigners said, no, we want a pardon. So the fight went on. And in 2013, he was pardoned. And as I said, that is the common law precedent that's been set up. And what's more, many other people have as well. And in fact, there's some legislation going through Parliament now, which is going to be known as the Turing laws, which will basically mean that anyone who's convicted. I mean, this is set up primarily for victims of the Le Brochet Amendment. The Le Brochet Amendment pre-1967, and it's got them pre-1982, because they've got different laws there. But what's good for Alan Turing is good for Alan Duncan, because the legal equation is identical. I should say, if you will.
Blind person, are you ready?
Okay, I think we're on.
Okay. Right then, this is Reel 4, Take 4, Panwo TV at Hadrian's Wall. I'm standing next to a modern representation, sort of postmodern, the steel, sort of like a robotic kind of reconstruction of the Emperor Hadrian. Now, what you say about Hadrian's Wall is named after him, of course, and I should say a few words about this particular emperor, because he was a bit of a sexual degenerate, actually. He fell in love with they say it's a Greek man. He was actually a boy by today's standards, and they were very much in love, and they had an affair, and Hadrian fell into a deep depression when this boy died.
He kidnapped him.
He kidnapped, that's right. Originally this guy was kidnapped, which is a pretty awful thing to do. I mean, of course, the Romans were all gay. I mean, all Roman men were gay. They were rather like modern Frenchmen, you know, every single one of them was gay. And let's face it, all French men are gay, aren't they? You know, ooh la la, that kind of thing. All right, so, and Emmanuel Macron is especially gay. So that's basically this particular individual, who was a rather strange and rather problematic and troublesome man.
Good.
Okay, I think we're on.
Okay. Right then, this is Reel 4, Take 4, Panwo TV at Hadrian's Wall. I'm standing next to a modern representation, sort of postmodern, steel, sort of like a robotic kind of reconstruction of the Emperor Hadrian. Now, what you say about Hadrian's Wall is named after him, of course, and I should say a few words about this particular emperor, because he was a bit of a sexual degenerate, actually. He fell in love with they say it's a Greek man. He was actually a boy by today's standards, and they were very much in love, and they had an affair, and Hadrian fell into a deep depression when this boy died.
He kidnapped him.
That's right. Originally this guy was kidnapped, which is a pretty awful thing to do. I mean, of course, the Romans were all gay. I mean, all Roman men were gay. They were rather like modern Frenchmen, you know, every single one of them was gay. And let's face it, all French men are gay, aren't they? You know, ooh la la, that kind of thing. All right, so, and Emmanuel Macron is especially gay. So that's basically this particular individual, who was a rather strange and rather problematic and troublesome man.
Good.
Oh, thanks. Just got to wait for Joe to start.
Action.
Right, this is Panwo TV at Hadrian's Wall, Reel 5, Take 5. Okay. Now, I am here. Let's wait for the motorbikes to stop interrupting us. That wasn't a problem in Roman times. I'm actually at the original site of the Fort Segedunum, and you can see here, you can just see through this fence here, the various structures. So, for example, there's a row of what used to be infantry barracks along here, where the soldiers actually used to sleep, and they used to sleep on these little wooden beds, which were very short. And they used to hang their equipment and their weapons up on hooks on the wall. And then the biggest structure is the commanding officer's house, which is like a big mansion-like structure on the far end. And beyond that were the cavalry headquarters, which included cavalrymen and stables for their horses. There's the big space in the middle, which presumably was like a parade ground or something like that. They used it for things like that. And the far side there was a hospital where they used to stick needles in people's eyes to cure them of blindness, which rather strange medical practice. They swore it worked, but they used to, I think they call it rubbing cataracts and things like that. So this basically, you can't actually see anything above ground level now. You just see there's just the foundations visible. So there's not an awful lot to see here, but it's interesting to actually see where this structure was.
Yeah.
Right. This is a Panwo TV Hadrian's Wall, Reel 6, Take 6. Now, what you see behind me is not actually Hadrian's Wall, but it's a modern replica of what Hadrian's Wall would have looked like. The actual wall itself here at Wall's End is actually just a low foundation stones. All you can see are stones. But this, as you can see, is in a remarkable structure. Stone created from blocks of stone. It's very, very thick, and it has a battlement. It has a pathway at the top with these battlements, which were clearly used to be used by the troops to defend the wall, and so prevent enemies from crossing over it. So this was essentially turned Britannia into a huge castle. Now, to build something like this is absolutely remarkable, and an amazing achievement, and would be extraordinarily expensive and involve a massive amount of resources. But they did it. The Romans did it because they wanted so badly to protect Britannia from enemy conquest. So they built this remarkable structure. It was incredible, and indeed it was not penetrated by any enemy from the north in all that time. And they had these amazing fortresses at various places where they had hypercourses, which Dave was telling me about, and they got them a bath too, where they used geothermal heat. But in there, they actually had fires lit underneath the floor, and the floor became hot, and they'd throw steam on it, and it'd be like a sauna. And they had a bathhouse, which is like, it's more bigger, it's much bigger than a bath. It's like a swimming pool, where the Romans used to love to go and swim. This is a big thing in Rome, all across the Roman Empire. They loved their baths, and so they were all very clean people. So it's really, really cool. And I mean, it just shows what good builders they were. They could create something like this. And indeed, in many places along this 80-mile stretch of wall, some of it is still standing. A lot of it's still standing. And I've been informed by somebody that some of it is still in use. It's actually being used as part of modern buildings. They're building modern structures against the remains of Hadrian's Wall. So it's not very often you can say that a 2,000-year wall, or 1,800-year-old wall, does actually last that long. So it's an incredible piece of work, and I'm sure they must have been very, very proud of it. And this is what it would have looked like.
Handwritten. This is the metro system as it was in the Roman days. As you can see, the monument is called Magna. Gateshead, of course, didn't exist because they're very slow to banquet. They hadn't been invented yet. The dinosaurs lived up here near Shymont. This would have been St. James's. Of course, James hadn't been born yet, so we couldn't call it St. James then. But there you go. The metro system was running and the Roman times, and here is the evidence to prove it. Cool.
I bought this book. Well, I didn't. He's not buying. He put a box of books which you can exchange for £1 donation. So I bought this. This is In Search of the Dark Ages by Michael Wood, and it actually describes the period of the fall of the Roman Empire, including the Boudica Rebellion, which is something that I'm very, very interested in, and it gives me these Boudica moments that I sometimes have. And I haven't had yet, but I might get one. You never know. You'll know if I do. And so I'm going to have a read through this. Michael Wood is a very, very famous TV historian. He wears these really tight jeans, and my mum used to fancy him. And he talks about everything from the ancient Greeks, and he goes around the world to various places. There's this TV show called Legacy, where he goes around the world, and he goes across to the Americas, and he talks about the Incas and the Aztecs, and there's a series called Conquistadors. He's got a series about India. A very, very, very interesting man indeed, very charismatic and very, very eloquent, very, very... so he's kind of a bit like me, but without a tinfoil hat. That's how I describe it. So I'll have a read through this, and I'll enjoy it very much, I'm sure. Well done.
Emlyn-Jones at Segadunum.
Okay, just say action.
Action!
Hospital reports, pride and dignity, stop the New World Order, real one, take one. Yeah. I've got a clapboard. Right, well, I am at Segadunum. Now, this is a real place where I'm going to have a massive Boudica moment, because I always said if I ever came to Hadrian's Wall, I'd have a Boudica moment. But I haven't yet. Where we are, we're on the side of the River Tyne, and we're a place called Wall's End. And why is it called Wall's End? It's called Wall's End because this is, as the name suggests, the easternmost frontier, the easternmost guards post of Hadrian's Wall. Segadunum was a Roman fort which was built by the Emperor Hadrian along with the wall, which is part of this amazing structure. It's 84-mile architectural wonder of the world, which goes all the way from here, and it crosses all the way across the north of England to something on Solway, on the Solway Firth, not far south of the modern border of Scotland. And believe it or not, this wall represents more than just the northern boundary of the final extent of the Roman Empire. It represents the edge of the Illuminati-occupied world at the time. This is an incredibly important place because the Roman conquest of Britain in the it was 40 AD by the Emperor Claudius, or was a turning point in history because the heart chakra of the world lies in the British Isles. The Roman Empire was the ultimate expression at the time of the Illuminati's long march through the ages to conquer the world. And this is something that had been running since the 3rd millennium BC, where they, after the fall of Atlantis in the 12th millennium BC, the 10th millennium BC, the Illuminati went underground until they could emerge as a world power in Sumeria in around about the year 3000 BC. It took them 3,000 years to reach the point where they were on the point of controlling the entire known world through the Roman Empire. The heart chakra of the world, known to the occult magicians behind the Roman Empire, lies in Britain. This is why you have so many crop circles in Britain. This is why the pre-Illuminati culture here built massive stone circles, which Maria Wheatley has talked about in great detail. In order to protect their possession on the island of Britain, this was actually quite controversial. The conquest of Britain was not universally approved of within the Roman society, within the empire, within the court of the empire. Julius Caesar attempted this in the year 50 BC, 53 BC, I believe, and he didn't succeed, although he did set up alliances with many of the independent tribes of Britain at that time. This paved the way for the full conquest of Britain in the almost a century, almost 90 years later, in the year 40 AD. Now, in order to maintain this province, they called it Britannia. Britannia was all of Roman Britain, which began in the southeast of the island and headed northwards and westwards all the way into what is now Wales, into what is now the West Country, and northwards into the North Country, until there was an attempt, I think, to conquer the entire island of Britain and put it under the Roman Empire. They sent many exploratory forces into what is now Scotland, and some of them didn't come back. There's the famous case of the disappearing Legion that actually left York and was never seen again, and no one knows what happened to it. Now, up to a quarter of the Roman army was permanently stationed in the province of Britannia during the course of the empire. When this was built on the reign of Hadrian, which I think was about 120 AD, and this lasted till the end of Roman rule. For a while, the Romans occupied what's now southern Scotland up to the Antonine Wall, crosses the country between the rivers Forth and the river Clyde, which is where Glasgow is now, across where the city of Glasgow and that area is now. And they built something called the Antonine Wall, which is a smaller version of Hadrian's Wall. It was, in a sense, Britain was a huge white elephant of the Roman Empire, and it would probably have been a lot better off if it would have lasted longer if it hadn't conquered Britain. As I said, up to a quarter of the entire armed forces were used in protecting this island and the Roman province of Britannia. And indeed, when the Roman Empire finally settled down and it agreed on the size where it was going to be, in order to protect its northern border, they built this. Segedunum and all the other fortresses along this huge 84-mile superstructure, one of the architectural and engineering wonders of the world. Like something that's never been seen before or since, apart from the Great Wall of China, and if it ever comes about, the Great Trumpian Wall, which is going to run along the border of the United States and Mexico. Although I don't think we're going to see that. So this what we see before us now, this wall. I don't know, which direction does the wall run in from here? I think it goes that way.
That way is the west end of Newcastle.
It heads eastwards through the...
No, that's west.
That's west, sorry. So that's the west.
West. It would head west.
That's going towards Newcastle, isn't it?
This is the end.
Right, so it goes in that direction.
No, that's east.
East.
It goes west.
It goes west, that's right. It goes through... That's towards Newcastle that way, isn't it?
No, that way. West.
Okay.
We're in the east of Newcastle.
Oh, I see. Right, so it goes west through
West.
up to the end of... Right across...
To Cumbria.
Through the northern moors. and across to Cumbria, that's right, and it ends up by the sea on the Solway Firth. The number of, I don't know exactly how many troops, but you'd have many, many regiments of troops that needed to be stationed here continuously to guard that boundary. This means they were very, very worried about invasion from the north, the people, the Caledonians, the Picts, these independent pre-Illuminati cultures that existed in what is today Scotland and the far north of England, posed an enormous threat to Britannia. And they were very, very concerned about invasion and occupation by those forces. And you can imagine the resources that would be necessary to create this structure, which even in this day and age, would be quite considerable. Therefore, it should make us stop and think about what's really going on. As you know, the Roman Empire fell. It fell. The Romans quit Britain in the 4th, 5th century. However, the Church, the Roman Catholic Church, took over and maintained that Illuminati control, and it succeeded far more than the Roman Church over the Roman Empire did. Conquered Scotland, Ireland, and most of the rest of the world. And it's just one of many methods to build the New World Order that's been running for all this time. This great work of the ages has now got to the point where we live in a global village, which is increasing in its power. It's increasing in its far reach, and the advancement now is in essentially the conquest of the human mind. There's no need for huge armies anymore when they can put things, ideas, and indeed physical adaptations to our brain that can make us feel, think, and behave in the way that the agenda wants us to. Therefore, to stand here on this historical spot, I think marks a turning point in history, because it represents, I think, a moment where it's rather like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, where you reach one of the milestones, but they can't take the money off you. You know what I mean? And then you go, right, whatever happens, you're going to get that check. But we don't want to give you that, we want to give you more. And so the Illuminati want that. The Illuminati want to push forward to that $1 million, £1 million mark. And it's up to us to stop them, unfortunately. And in a way, I feel envious of the people who lived back then when this war was an active part of the edge of the Roman Empire, because things were simpler. Things were easier. They were physically more difficult, but you didn't have these mental barriers to overcome that you do today. And so I think our challenge today is greater. And there is a wall now, very similar to the Hadrian's Wall, but it's far greater, it's far bigger, it's far more imposing. And it's inside the mind of every man, woman and child on the planet. And until that wall comes down, unfortunately we will never be free. Whether we can do it or not, well, I think only history can know for sure. Only the future can tell us that. We don't know. But we can look at history, we can look at the past, we can look at this archaeological site, and we can work out, I think, perhaps how we can do it, and what clues and what models the future could actually present to us. So, thank you very much for that.
Thank you, everybody.
And now all I'm going to do is ask for my fee from you. Well, this is Reel 2, Scene 2 from Hypnotic TV at Hadrian's Wall, 2nd of June. Okay, now this is a very interesting picture here. Dave, we've got Dave with us, and he's quite an expert on this sort of thing.
Dave's expert.
Now, Dave's I've got to say to Dave that Dave is sort of the historical expert here. But he said something to me about this sort of thing. We have here the remains of a Roman toilet. It's like a stone, don't touch it. It's a stone thing with a hole. But this is a diagram of how it was used. You have like the toilet seats, and everything from the toilet seats falls into this sewer underneath. These Roman sewers are pretty effective. Some of them are still in use today, it's so effective. And there'll be some water flowing through the little outlet inlet at the top, and these big bowls of water here with sticks here with sponges on the end. Now what you do is, as you can see here, these Romans are sitting there with their trousers around their ankle, having a chinwag. They're sort of like debating the affairs of state while they're having a crap, which seems to be rather strange. Modern politicians, they just talk crap. They don't actually talk while they're having a crap. So maybe there's a bit less hypocrisy here than you get with the modern political structure, which is one of the things I like about the Romans. You see, this water will flow along, and you have this stick here, and you stick the sponge in there, and you wipe your nether regions, with the sponge, which was a bit awful, because when they're having this talk, all right, and one of these politicians, when they're having a political debate, says, "Look, mate, I think you've got the wrong end of the stick here." it could have more than one meaning, and you might not want to grab the wrong end of this.
Is that
stick.
right, expert Dave? Is that correct?
Hence the term, rather than the wrong end of the stick.
Yeah.
All right, maybe it does.
You never know.
So this is a simple, very effective. It's a very effective way of keeping poo and pee, to use those polite terms, out of the drinking water. So this is actually a pretty good system, even in medieval England. And, you know, 1,000 or 1,500 years later, they didn't have anything as good as this, and they kept dying of the cholera because they were drinking the same water that they were releasing. But the Romans solved that problem over a millennium earlier, but we couldn't learn from them, which is a real great shame. That's an interesting piece of Roman lavatorial history there. Reel 3, take 3. Now, I just had a piece of information given to me by one of my companions here today, who's accompanied me on this expedition, and it refers to something called the broom of the stool. Now, this apparently, it doesn't directly refer to this, or I'm sure the Romans had their equivalent, but in the royal household there is a person who's known as the groom of the stool. Now, the role of the groom of the stool was to be personally responsible for monitoring and attending to the king or queen's bowel movements. This means when they did something or passed something, you had to dispose of it accordingly with the proper ceremony. So you probably had to say a prayer or something whenever you threw their turds into the ditch, because they're royal turds. You know, they're not just like anybody's. So you couldn't just like tip them away. Now what's interesting is that the groom of the stool was always an aristocrat. So it wasn't like a player, it wasn't like a peasant. And the last groom of the stool was the Duke of, I forgot the name which Duke it was, but anyway, he was the Duke of somebody, and he served the Prince of Wales between 1848 and 1913, and where that was the last official groom of the stool. And then when Prince of Wales became King Edward VII in 1926, I think it was, the role of groom of the stool was abolished, and therefore the king or the queen had to attend to their own bottom. And though I do wonder if possibly the role continued in secret, and who knows, maybe the queen herself still has one. Perhaps the reason the groom of the stool is so important is because they had to have somebody who didn't know or did know, and could be trusted not to talk about the difference between mammalian and reptilian species, because it's reptilian, isn't it? It's the king or queen. So that's an interesting piece of trivia for you.
Hello, my husband.
Hello, Jeff. Hail Caesar.
Wait a minute, folks. Wait a minute. Lights, camera, action.
It's on.
Okay. Right. Hail Caesar. My name is Ben, the Emperor Ben, and I am the Caesar of Rome. I'm the Emperor of Rome, and I am the agent of the Illuminati in the first millennium AD, when the Roman Empire was expanding into the island of Great Britain because it needed to control the heart chakra of the world. Now, the common folk don't know this. We don't tell them, do we?
No, this is Empress Agrippa.
So,
Carry on,
this is
man.
my wife Agrippa. She's the Empress. You know, and we were married on a court thing, you know, towards the inside. Royal barge and everything. Anyway, now we don't let the common people know this, because if they did, they would revolt against the New World Order. My job is to perpetrate the New World Order on the unsuspecting population of the world. This is our long march through the ages, our great work of the ages, which has been running for 3,000 years. And we hope that we can complete around about 2,000 years from now. You know, that's when we do it.
2018, I think, my dear.
You are a pessimist. Yeah, we will be done and dusted by the year 2000, I think. So, my court magicians, my satanic black magicians, who I work with, have informed me the necessity to occupy the island of Great Britain, because this is where the Illuminati can get its power from the heart chakra of the world. the ancient pre-Illuminati people understood this, which is why they built lots and lots of stone monuments here, massive number of stone monuments, thousands of years ago, building these things. This is also why, in future years, in farms, there'll be strange patterns appearing in the fields when the crop is mature.
From the crop.
They will call them crop circles in those times. This is 2,000 years in the future, mind you. Now, so it's very, very important to us that we control this little island. It's very, very important. I'm so certain we need to do this. We have to do this. In order to do this, we're going to build a massive wall, 84 miles long. It's never been done before. It's going to be a huge undertaking, but it's going to be one of the greatest building achievements of the mankind. But this is necessary to protect our sacred province of Britannia from the Caledonians and the Picts in the north. We keep wanting to invade it and occupy it. So I'm going to put thousands and thousands of troops to man this wall. It's going to be very, very big and very, very high, and no one will ever be able to get past it. That's how important this is to me. I mean, some of the people in the Senate and that, they don't like it. The plebs, yes. The various plebs in the Senate, they don't like it. So that's just too bad, because they're not initiated into the Illuminati, and I am. So we know these things, don't we?
My dear, I recently had this picture commissioned, me and yourself.
Right.
But this is reflecting when you have hair, my dear.
I'm right.
Do you recall?
I do recall. I don't have hair.
No, when you have hair, my dear.
Oh, those are the days, yes. I don't really know.
And this is me.
Oh, lovely. You've had your hair, you've grown in a
I've
bit.
grown in a bit.
The old Dutch bob doesn't really suit you.
No, basket, yeah.
The sort of Hollywood Robin Hood look. I kind of grew out of it, so I decided to go slap head. I think you look very grand. Yes, indeed. This nice little red tabard, you see.